I can make the introduction. So welcome again to everyone. This webinar, as you might know, is part one of a three-part webinar series. At this first session today, we will look at how using business model and alignment can drive organizational strategy. We will discuss about the difference between business strategy and business models, and we will differentiate good strategy from bad strategy, and we will have a basic understanding of the business model canvas and linear canvas. At the same time, we will practice how to align the managers and employees' strategic priorities. So today, shortly, our session will consist of some theory, a case study, and a linear canvas exercise. So that is the plan of today. If you have any question, you can just ask via chat, or you can just raise your hand during the webinar. So let's continue. So should I also talk a little bit about myself, maybe? Raul, okay.
Go for it, yeah.
Yeah, okay. Me, as you see, my name is Inanç. The last name is Civas, very strange last name. And for European, it's also very strange first name. I'm a consultant backgrounded person. I am the founder of Haga Business Consultancy located in Den Haag in the Netherlands. I am mainly dealing with the projects for the holistic business agility from the strategy point of view, from the cultural point of view, and from the structural point of view. So that's a very short introduction, and we can continue with Raul.
Hi, everyone. So yes, as Inanç mentioned, we will be talking through the different parts of a business strategy and how you can use alignment, as well as different business models to help you achieve that. So you must be wondering who I am. I think a few of you have probably met Inanç before. I've spoken with her. My name is Rahul Bhattacharya. I'm based here in Berlin, in Germany. And I work as a business coach and a trainer and a speaker on different product, agile, lean topics. My background is in agile coaching. I've been doing that for roughly the past decade. And as you can see, I also offer some of the different trainings on the top left side of your screen. So feel free to learn more about me by clicking on my website. And yeah, excited to see a few people here today and do this webinar with you guys today.
Yes. So let's start with a video if you want. So to just make an introduction. So I'm sharing my screen already. I hope that you'll hear it.
All our work is done. So what are you going to do with all these underpants that you steal? Collecting underpants is just phase one. Phase one, collect underpants. So what's phase two? Hey, what's phase two? Phase one, we collect underpants. Yeah, but what about phase two? Well, phase three is profit, get it? I don't get it. You see, phase one, collect underpants. Phase two, phase three, profit. I get it.
Yeah. Here you see, it's a bit interesting video. And so I guess I need to, again, make this story. So we see gnomes are working hard and they are trying to collect the underpants. And they hope in the end of these activities lead to profit. But there is a missing step in between, as you see. The missing step indeed is called strategy. What is their strategy? We don't know. And the second important question arising, indeed, are all gnomes aligned during this activity? So we start with the strategy part. The strategy indeed is actually the cognitive application of two basic human instincts. The first one is survival and the second one is being in a better position. Here, in this example, we see that gnomes are trying to be in a better position by making profit, but did miss something. They miss something. What is that? It's not only strategy. Indeed, above it, the mindset was missing, which we call strategic thinking. And what is strategic thinking? It's strategic thinking is to think about what do I want to achieve. It's about how do I get it, which is strategy, the second phase. How do I measure it, indeed, which is progress. How do I distribute my resources, which is effectiveness. And how do I overcome my challenges, and how do I revise my strategy if it is necessary, it's agility. If we think from the business perspective, how the companies achieve competitive advantage and make it sustainable, indeed, is the basic question of organizational strategic management. You can start to think strategically when and if you have a vision or purpose. So the first question to ask to ourselves, indeed, what do I want to achieve? Imagine that you want to achieve building a castle, and imagine that this new castle is indeed your new business model. So naturally, you don't want to share your profit so quickly with unexpected visitors, right? You may want to create some barriers to protect your dream. And here, it's at that point, you create your strategy. In this picture, the strategy is the moat surrounding the castle. But your strategy can be different than others who are having the same castle, or in other words, the same vision. This picture is moat, but another person who has a similar vision can prefer to use another strategy. Why do I choose this picture? Maybe some of you might remember, but there was a discussion on Twitter between Elon Musk and Warren Buffett in year 2018. Buffett was referring to a buffer that companies need surrounding buffer, helping them to maintain their competitive advantage. He was arguing that companies with strong and sustainable moats do still exist, and that technology has not destroyed them in every industry. But Musk criticized Buffett's investing strategy of looking for companies with a moat or any other buffer to maintain an edge over competing brands or business models. According to Elon Musk, moats are lame, and what matters is the pace of innovation. So I would like to share again a small part of this discussion. That's a funny discussion maybe, but we can.
Enterprise artificial intelligence has the power to transform the most complex organizations. And
yeah, because Bloomberg doesn't allow.
Musk. This is fascinating. I was out there at the meeting, and I saw that question asked, which was supposed to have moats, and saying Musk is really dumping on you, Warren, essentially, because he's saying moats are out of date. And he said, well, let him come after me and candy. And then Elon Musk immediately tweets back, I'm starting a candy company, and it's going to be amazing. And he goes on and says, I'm super, super serious about this.
There's almost a kind of Trumpian element to this, right? Like, that's it. We're starting a candy company. Like, keep doing your space thing, keep building your tunnels, but I'm going to start a candy company too. It's just.
Well, I hope he's joking. Don't you think? I mean,
okay, but super serious.
It's not as capital intensive. He wouldn't have to raise as much money.
Here's the thing. He's trying to get Model 3 off the ground.
Yeah.
He's complaining that he's sleeping in his office on a really uncomfortable couch or futon. What are you doing?
And he's trying to go to Mars, by the way.
Right. What are you doing listening into whatever is happening at Berkshire Hathaway? Like, do your job and stop being mean to analysts instead of tweeting.
And the other Musk story, just while we're talking about that, is a must read on the Bloomberg today, is about the YouTuber who really took over the call last week. So for reading later, for those up in TV land.
Yeah. So it's a bit strange conversation, I guess, because you see, I mean, Elon Musk pretend that he can even establish a candy company, and whatever moat Warren Buffett puts, it's not important. Oops, the other part is starting. Okay.
So,
okay, I close this. Okay. So, as you see, you can build your castle wherever you want and however you want. That's your vision. And how you will use your environment, resources, and how you will overcome the challenges, indeed, how you will keep your competitive advantages, completely, it's up to you. The strategies may vary and may be revised accordingly. But the important thing to keep in the mind is to make your strategy as good as possible, according to the existing conjuncture. According to Michael Porter, there are 5 approaches for a good strategy. A good strategy, first of all, is a unique value proposition that differs from the competition. It creates a unique value chain from the structure. It's about making clear choices and a good understanding of what not to do. And it's about organization of mutually supportive and harmonious activities. And of course, it's continuous improvement to realize your strategy. So, but the story doesn't end here. When we think about our strategy, we also need to understand the difference between good and bad strategy, but also right versus wrong strategy. We overread Porter's 5 good strategy approaches. And if we also want to check if our strategy is right, we can also ask to ourselves some basic questions as a checklist. So our strategy, does it excite us? Is it relevant and different from the competitors? Is it applicable? Are our resources available? And is the competitive advantage sustainable? These are some kind of small questions that we can think about it. So far we overviewed what is strategy and what is strategic thinking and what is good versus bad strategy and what is right and wrong strategy. If you think about, again, the South Park video examples about the norms, maybe we remember the second important questions, if all norms are aligned. We had asked if they are aligned. Why? Because we are living in an uncertain environment. And we all know that success depends on our ability to respond to the market and customer demands. So business must adapt in uncertainty, shift priorities, and ensure the delivery of our products or services, whatever it is, which are consistent with our strategy. So please keep this shifting priorities in our mind, which is indeed a prerequisite to ensure the strategic alignment. Because what we say in the end of the day, we say that we want to ensure the delivery of our services, which are consistent with our strategy. Why? Because we want happy customers who will leave us good money, profit, which will help us to realize and sustain our dreams. And everything starts with the engaged employee. As we know, we need a team to realize it. Even ourselves is a team. But the flow to have engaged employees may not be so easy because we are living in a complex environment. We are living in complex systems. And the organizations are consistent of individuals, teams, and many different functionality within the same organization who need to collaborate as effective as possible. And as you might know, and we all know, people may not collaborate all the time in their best way. Because people, we are not cogs in a machinery. We are unique. We have our own feelings. We have our own dreams, challenges, and our own values, and so on, which cannot be controlled but need to be understood. So we are not robots, at least for the moment. We are all very complex adaptive systems that work from intrinsic motivation. We are living organisms who are needed to be treated differently to work optimally. But in order to work optimally in our organization, there is a magical word, which is priority. Priorities can change from person to person, as we are emphasizing. But the important thing to consider is that top to bottom declared priorities may not work even in our daily business life. If you want that your business strategy is being understood and implemented properly within your organization, you need to understand bottom to top priorities. Then you can ensure the strategic alignment to deliver your services properly with the potential of your employees. So if you cannot align these priorities, forget about the strategy alignment overall, you may even not use your real potential of your employees of your daily task. So, generally in organizations, leadership puts broad direction in priorities, but the teams usually define their own priorities. And if there's a huge alignment gap between the manager's priorities and the employers, then you are in trouble. So because of that reason, we need to link employees' goals to the business priorities. Because of that reason, we had created this basic but useful tool for transparently linking employees' goals to the business priorities. Here you see at the horizontal axis, the priorities of the employees, and the vertical axis, you see the priorities from the manager's perspective. The aim is to come up to common priorities, which is stated at quadrant 1. This way of connecting priorities and to see also them separately is crucial to ensure for a better strategic alignment within your organization. And also understanding the different needs provides us flexibility, which is a core practice, of course, for agile way of working. Plus, this perspective is also significant practice to see if employees are to have a sense of meaning and purpose in their work. For example, let's see an example. This graph is a result of one of our workshops that we made with one of our clients. What we did here, we work the priorities from the management and employees perspective. Then we introduce all of these keywords in a transparent way into the management. As you see at quadrant 3, we see the what is important for the employees. For example, career planning, performance management system, and feeling worthless was the most important thing. But on quadrant 2, we see the managers' priorities, which has nothing. Which is not aligned with the employees' priorities. They were thinking about the culture, more collaborating culture. They were thinking about board problems. They were thinking about how they can collaborate better with their group companies. JV is the shortened of joint ventures. So we, by the way, this company had hired us to manage their performance system, to change their performance management system to be able to act more agile. But why we work on this alignment of priorities first? First and foremost, if you want that your company's strategy to be implemented correctly, you need to understand the challenges that team face. This client, as I said, had hired us to change their performance management system. But even though the management chose us and pay us for this shift, that was even not in their priority list. However, teams need to understand thought process behind the strategy before that they can execute it effectively. So you can start to clear up any confusion by explaining the context behind the strategies. Here, in that case, the context was about the white elephant. The problem was not about the performance management system. So we had decided to start our projects to focusing on this white elephant and not taking initiative and strategy alignment within the company. So as you see, this basic tool to make the priorities a little bit transparent may look simple, but to be able to talk in front of the board helps a lot to start our implementation to go to the execution of our strategy. When we think about norms, about the video that we saw together, maybe if they had understood what they needed to collect the underpants, besides only making profit, most probably they would be able to figure out the phase 2, which is how part. Vice versa, if the mayor, the director norm, would understand the collecting norms, challenges, maybe he would also help them to figure out better how to how to make profit. This is what I will tell today during this webinar, theoretically. We talk about a little bit strategy and the importance of alignment. Now, Raul will continue with the difference between business strategy and business models.
Yeah, thanks, Ananj. Great. So for me, before we even talk about business strategy, it starts with something called the business vision, right? And without vision, there is no strategy. You want to have this idea of where you want to be, where you want to go, so that your strategy then enables you to get there, right? The strategy is then the means to that end. There's a really nice talk by Simon Sinek, and we'll send out the slides afterwards so that you can take a look. It's an hour-long talk that he did a couple of years ago at a conference where he talks about the concept of the infinite game. And in this talk about the infinite game, Sinek's talk has two main points. Firstly, which is the goal of companies is to stay in the game for as long as possible and not just look for quick wins. So today's innovations become tomorrow's basic needs. If we're talking with something like the Kano model, for example, right? So the goal for a company is not just to come up with flashy new products that are helpful for their product today, for their company today, but to make innovation systemic, right? To build a process around constant innovation and value delivery, rather than having one or a few big bets that you have in your strategy. So when you're thinking about business strategy, it's important to have it set up for the long term, for the infinite game, as Simon Sinek says, and not just for a year or for the next 5 years or for the next 10 years. And another example he talks about in that talk is focusing on getting better than your past self. So as an organization, you want to focus on your goals, your vision, and getting better, having a better strategy to get to your vision rather than trying to replicate another company's strategy, right? So he gives the example of a conference that he went to for Apple, and he compares that to a quarterly meeting for Microsoft. And in the Apple one, they constantly talked about how they can improve, for example, the iPhone, how they can improve products and services that they offer. Whereas in the Microsoft one, from his observations, he noticed that they were talking about how Microsoft can be better than Apple, right? How can they launch a phone, or how can they launch a tablet that's maybe more easy to use or better than Apple's, right? And he explains the difference. One of them is more successful than the other because they have their own vision, right? They're not trying to follow other companies' visions or other companies' strategies. And because of that, Apple at the moment is better at assessing and meeting customer needs, right? And he argues that organizations that do that stay in the game much longer and are successful for a much longer time. So when applying this concept to strategy, it's really important to start with creating a business vision that's unique for your organization. Now, let's talk about business strategy and business models and the difference between the two. As you can see, the business strategy is how you're getting to that long-term goal. Yeah, it's this plan, it's this idea of how you're going to achieve that vision that you have. And it's not always a linear path. What you need for a really great strategy is focus, right? You want to choose one path over another. As Inanj mentioned earlier, companies get competitive advantage by maybe solving the same problem a little bit differently, right? And maybe they're applying different concepts, different products, different ways of looking at the problem that other companies are not. And at the end of the day, this is what gives their strategy this competitive edge. So focusing on specific paths over other ones is really great for creating a business strategy. You also want to have a vision, which I mentioned, right, to help achieve this long-term strategic goal. And the third most important thing is also having this commercial viability, because at the end of the day, it needs to resonate with your customers. Whatever strategy you have, the product or service that you're selling as an organization needs to be viable with the larger audience. And if it is, then therefore you create a self-sustaining business. Right, so when we talk about strategy, to break it down again, very simply, it's how you're going to get towards this long-term goal, this vision that you have. And a business model, on the other hand, it helps execute a business strategy. And it consists of things like customer acquisition, retention, supply chain, monetization. These are different aspects of a business model. And a business model is then a subset of your business strategy. There can be different ways of achieving the strategy. Oh, let me just present it once more. Sorry about that. All right. So the strategy then drives the different business model that you have. Yeah. And to have a successful strategy, as we'll look at in the next few slides, you need more than just one successful business model or one successful product. So this is a great image that describes the relationship between business strategy here on the left and the different business models that help you achieve your vision on the right. Yeah. And in the middle, you have things like the tactics, the actions, the focus, or the decisions that you make, as well as trial and errors. As I mentioned, the strategy is not a linear path. You may maybe try a business model that gives you some insights about your customers, about where your product can pivot, but then you learn from there and you change your strategy, right? So it's a constantly evolving thing. So a strategy, again, is this deliberate vision to get towards the long-term goal on the right-hand side. And the business models are tools that help you execute that strategy. So while achieving a long-term goal, a business strategy sets a vision, the value proposition is thing that can be executed through different business models. So how is your product or service that you're offering helping provide value for the users, whether it's the end users or different levels of users? So when one of the drafted business models has this product market fit, that's when a strategy becomes successful, right? And as I mentioned, the strategy is then non-linear. You will have trials and errors. You will have learnings from the execution bit that you need to incorporate into your strategy and then change your plan, right? Whether it's pivoting towards a different customer base or pivoting towards adding new features on an existing product. So this is how you can use business models a little bit to drive and to incorporate this feedback into your business strategy. Let's look at another example. So Tesla's strategy, right? This image sums it up really well, but to say a few words before that, in general, the beauty of a strategy that turns a company successful is that you can only see that strategy as being successful in hindsight. Yeah, when you're going through the motions, when you're executing the strategy, when you're using the feedback to change your strategy, it may not be obvious what is the right path, right? Only when you look back, you can see a really well planned out strategy. So let's look back at Tesla's market entry strategy. They started in 2008 with the smaller version of the car, right? They wanted to build an electric sports car that had ready to be marketed, and they finally pulled it off, right? They created this first prototype, this first version. But many companies, before getting into a fully rolled out strategy, go through a period of low scalability and low market size, right? So you have to have a niche that you're targeting, a niche customer base, and build a smaller product for that smaller market size so that you can get traction, so that you can validate your ideas, so that you can see what makes sense. And the learnings that you get from that execution of the strategy, you can then apply and scale to your strategy to a wider audience. So what Tesla did, they created that first edition of the Roadster to a smaller audience. And then they saw what worked, right? What did the clients like? What did they not like? And they made a few twists based on that. And then they offered the second version, right, of the Roadster, right? And so it's using this feedback to continually modify your business strategy. That is one that's important, rather than setting a strategy from the beginning and executing it over the next 5 or 10 years. Because that usually will not get you the desired results. Talking about scalability, as I mentioned, once Tesla created that Roadster in 2008, that reduced their dependence on that sedan, on an electric sedan. And they could then deliver, for example, the Model S as a key part of the transition to mass producing electric cars, right? So they initially got this product market fit with the Roadster that helped them gain initial traction with customers, make some profit to then roll out and scale out more complex versions of the car at a higher scale, right? To broader audiences, to bigger markets. So this is something that's called a transitional business model, where you transition from an initial strategy to a later one with the help of scale. So a lot of companies use this transitional business model to enter a market, usually starting with a niche audience. And they use it to gain initial traction and make sure that their idea is sound, right? And that there's a product market fit before they scale it up to a wider audience. This also helps them gain capital and have a reality check, right? To see if the product resonates with their target audience. And in return, this also helps them shape their long-term vision and scale their business model beyond that. To look at another example, Netflix, another well-known example. At the middle, you can see Netflix, when they entered the market, their strategy was with DVD rentals. And when they moved from DVD rentals to streaming, using the same transitional business model that we looked at, it helped Netflix then stay in business in the first place, because DVDs were going out of trend, out of fashion. People were streaming more than they were buying DVDs or renting DVDs. And so using this transition helped them stay in business. And then they start expanding beyond that, right? Now they're looking at things like augmented reality to expand its market even further beyond what they offer currently. So when we talk about a business model, there are lots of different parts to it that we'll look at shortly. But things like target customers, distribution channels, revenue models, value proposition, customer relationship, these are all important parts of a business model. And we're going to look at some of them in deeper detail. Looking at Google's, right, another well-known example of an organization that has a successful strategy, let's look at their business model, right? One of the models that helps them execute that strategy. So they have three parts to it. They have the users at the top, where we can search for anything for free, right? This is the value proposition. As a user, I can search for anything and get an answer to anything, and it doesn't cost me money. They also have the businesses who get more sales through targeted ads, right? So the value proposition is different one than for the users. So for different customers, they have different value propositions, as you can see. For the publishers, they have the product of an AdSense, where publishers can monetize their content. Yeah. And so they can put out content as a publisher. You can earn money based on what you're publishing, whether it's blog posts or podcasts or videos or something else, right? So it's three different value propositions. And this is really smart because they're not putting all their eggs in one basket. Yeah, because if, for example, the value proposition for the businesses, the AdWords product is not so successful, the other value propositions can be then successful and still make the strategy successful. Yeah, so this is a three-way business model that Google has. So to say a few words, when you think about creating business models and using that to drive your business strategy, don't fall in love with a specific model or a specific way of addressing your strategy. Fall in love with this problem. And so when you stumble across something like a business formula that happens to work, that happens to have a product market fit, and it's making your company a lot of money, you can't stop there, right? That business formula, that business model that you have could be because you're lucky, and it may not allow you to scale, right? So you might want to look at different forms of business models and incorporate them into your strategy, like Google did, like we just saw in the previous slide. So you need to constantly get into this habit of looking at customer problems, market trends, and business opportunities over the things that you've discovered. Right? The value is in the repeatable process of discovery and not in what you discover itself. Right? Because once you spread this discovery, once you spread, the lessons that you've learned, it loses value eventually. And you need to discover new things, and you need to find out new things about the market, about your product, about your organization, and about your customers. So one way of doing that is by looking at and using something called a business model canvas. This is a model that helps you have an overall strategic vision of your business, and is comprised of 9 different building blocks. And these building blocks are important for assessing your long-term strategy. So these are some of the building blocks, right? Like key partners, key activities, key resources. These are not independent of one another. So in many cases, they are strictly tied to the other building blocks. For example, your value proposition is tied to your customer segments and your customer relationships, like we looked at in the Google example. Yeah, different customer segments may have different value propositions. And from the interactions between these 9 different building blocks of the canvas, you can build a sustainable business model that you can test to see if it can help you achieve your business strategy and help you achieve your vision that you have. So I want to quickly look at the example. Let's stick with Google as the company, and let's look at and let's create a business model canvas for Google and their business strategy. So the first block is the key partners. And these are the people that you're working with, potentially suppliers. What are the motivations for the partnerships? These are questions that you want to ask when you're filling out key partners. AOL is one of them. So initially, Google made a deal with AOL, America Online. Used to be a chatting software, right? So Google made this deal with them to be featured on the search engine on its portal initially. And this gave them a lot of visibility, right? When they were breaking into the market, this gave Google a lot of visibility for AOL users. So they basically leveraged the target audience from AOL to build their network and to advertise their product. So AOL on its hand was offered such a good deal from the Google. So it also saw search as a secondary feature, right? Not the most important thing for them. And so it agreed to this partnership with Google. And while we give for granted the billions of queries that go on every day through Google, we miss the fact that Google built up this huge and vast distribution network that guarantees this traffic. Yeah, and how it did that is with these partnerships with AOL, with companies like Apple and so on. So they guarantee this traffic. It's not just by luck that they have so many people going to Google every day. So with the Apple example, they came up with this multi-billion-dollar deal very early on in Google's history, where Google was featured as the default search engine for Apple, specifically for Safari, for the browser, right? So when you open Safari, by default, you're on google.com. And what that does for Google is then give them exposure to the customer segments for Apple. And for Apple, it allows them to offer a well-maintained search for their users, right? So this is a very nice example of how Google created and has these key partners to drive their business strategy forward. The second building block is key activities. So if you look at Google's mission, it's to organize the world's information and make it universally accessible and useful. When you're thinking about key activities for your business, you want to think about what are the most important in terms of distribution channels, in terms of customer relationships, in terms of revenue stream. So what key activities does your value proposition require? What do you need to do? So for Google, this is innovation, offering new products, and having a business model based on multiple sources, like we looked at earlier. right? So they need to keep innovating its search algorithms, while it also looks at new ways that the web is developing, from maybe things like voice search to artificial intelligence to image lookups and so on, right? These new ways that the web is developing, Google needs to keep up with these market trends and build them into existing products that they have to stay relevant as a search engine. They also want to offer new products like voice search, for example, right? This is a quickly growing area now for search. And Google, for instance, launched its new voice devices like Google Home, Cortana, and so on. And a lot of its activities, when we think about Google and what they do, most of their revenue is still generating from advertising. So at the core of their business model, they have this source of advertising, but it's usually not a good idea to have a single source of revenue, right? Because that's not sustainable in the long run, because things might change and you may find other ways, and that source may diminish over time as well. So this is why Google is investing resources in other areas that might lead to more innovation and more customers and new products. The third part of a business model canvas is the value proposition. And this is what makes you unique. Yeah, at its core, value proposition is what makes you stand out from your competitors. So for Google, that's having a free search engine for billions of users around the world. Yeah, so it allows Google to have this exposure to different people, and they have a great and reliable free service that anyone can use around the world. Another value proposition that they have is their advertising business. So they have Gmail, Google Analytics, Google Books, Chrome, and other services and products that are free to use for everyone in the world. And they have free platforms as well as paid versions of the same product, right? And when we talk about advertising, they're focused on targeting text-based ads for businesses via something called AdSense. That's the network that they use to monetize the advertising for publishers. So Google managed to scale up this cost per click advertising at massive levels. Yeah, and that creates a platform for small publishers to monetize their content. Yeah, so in a way, it's really this democratization of the advertising market, where anyone with content can get a lot of eyeballs on their content, and they can monetize it independently on their own if they have their own brand, right? Without maybe going through a bigger publisher or without going to a bigger brand. They can do this independently. And so this is a big part of Google's value proposition. As an individual or small business, you have this ability to monetize your content. When we look at customer relationships, one of them is their connection with Salesforce and their support for AdWords. But when we think about customer relationships as a business, you want to think about what relationship that the target customer expects you to establish. How can you integrate your business in terms of cost and format? As I mentioned earlier, the cash cow for Google is this AdWords network, where they make a number of businesses looking to sponsor their products and services, and they offer them this platform, right, that they can monetize from. So this implies two things. Firstly, that Google needs to keep offering targeted ads to allow businesses to generate leads for their businesses for making profit. And secondly, Google is worth as much as the qualified traffic that it can generate. And Google does a really good job of understanding this. So unless they generate traffic constantly at a high rate, they don't make money from their ads, right? So Google needs to keep focusing on making sure that users go back to its search result pages. And even if users don't pay Google for search results, like we don't, The users are the real product, yeah, because they're then exposed to the different ads from the different businesses. Yeah, this is how they make money. Looking at something like the customer segments, what sort of customers are Google engaging, right? Who are they targeting? You want to, when you're creating this segment of the business model canvas, you want to think about what classes are you creating value for? Who are your most important customers? So even though Google is free service for everyone, Google's users are the most important customers for them, right? Because if everyone stopped using Google, there would be no business for them at all, right? So free internet users is a big chunk of their customer segment. Then they also have agencies, marketers, businesses, those who are bringing the big bucks to Google as agencies, as marketers, as businesses, as part of their ad network. They're driven by the fact that Google is an incredible source of getting targeted and qualified ads, right? So they know that if they put their ads to Google at a very low cost, it will then be shown to the relevant people. And they have a high chance of earning profit from these ads. And similarly, they also have the publishers, where Google offers targeted ads on web properties, for example. So it's important that Google keeps offering these publishers enough incentives so that they can keep monetizing their content through their AdSense platform. Yeah. Some of the key resources for Google, for example, is firstly their IT infrastructure. And the resources, these are things that are important the most in distribution channels. So even though Google is a digital business that you might think the company has no real or tangible assets, this is actually not true. To give you an example, in 2017, Google had roughly 7 billion contractual obligations to build different things related to data center operations, digital media licensing, and buying inventory. So they invest a lot in their IT infrastructure to ensure that their software and their cloud services and the rest of their business can operate smoothly. And they also want to have an algorithm update because they want to stay on top of their game to keep innovating in the search industry, right? So they want to maintain their algorithms for things like voice, for things like image, for things like text-based search, to make sure that they offer all these different new options to the customers that are looking for it. In 2017, Google actually spent around $16 billion in research and development. And that 16 billion was about 15% of their total revenue, which is a big portion. So, you know, companies like Google understand that it's important to invest in yourself, in your company, in your key resources so that you can continue operating your business model. And we also have distribution channels, right? So how does Google distribute its product or service? They rely on this global sales team to grow the operations, as well as deals and partnerships. So when you think about distribution channels, there are steps it takes for a product to get in the hands of a customer. So how can you get it from your organization to the customer, to your target customer? And these distribution channels can be either direct or indirect. They can be physical, they can be digital, right? Depends on the type of business you're operating and the industry that you're in. So in the example of Google, they use business development to keep growing Google operations. And Google deals and partnerships bring it to billions of devices around the world, like we saw with Apple, with things like Chrome, right? With Google phones and so on. So they distribute their product through these different channels. The cost structure is also important to think about as a business, as an organization, right? Because what are your highest costs of the business and which key resources or activities are the most expensive, are costing you a lot of money? With over $110 billion in revenue in 2017, Google reported 12 billion net profit. Yeah, so while their revenue was 110 billion, their profit was only 12 billion. Yeah, so roughly 11-12% of that. And so let's look at their cost structure, what they spend money on. Traffic acquisition cost. Like I talked about earlier, they need to guarantee that there's constant traffic to Google. Yeah, this is a key part of their business model. And so Google pays money to acquire traffic, right? And this is a crucial metric to assess their ability to generate value over the next few years. They also spend money on research and development, as I was talking about with the algorithm updates, right? They spent around $16 billion in 2017 alone, just to research and update their algorithm. They also spend on sales and marketing. It's roughly, for the year of 2019, 12% of their total costs. So whether it's sales to different potential partners or marketing with partners that they already have, coming up with these deals costs some decent chunk of money. And lastly, the data centers also take up a big bunch of their costs. In the next section, we have their revenue stream. So this is how the cost structure is, how they spend money. Their revenue streams is how they're earning it. So for what value are your customers willing to pay? And how do they pay, right? How would they prefer to pay? How much does every revenue stream contribute to the overall revenue? And it's smart to have different revenue streams, right? So that you don't just rely on a single source of income for your business, because if that one fails, then your business can go bust. So as I mentioned earlier, Google has their AdSense network. They have other revenues like apps, like the Google App Store, in-app purchases, digital content in the Google Play Store. And they have other bets as well, like Google Cloud services that different businesses use, and different hardwares like the Google phone. Right, so all these represent different revenue streams or different ways of making money for Google. So that's a quick run through of the business model canvas and example of how it looks like for Google. What we want to look at today for the next, let's say 30-35 minutes is something called the lean canvas. And the lean canvas is a little more simpler, and it's a variation of the business model canvas created by a guy called Alexander Osterwalder and a guy called Ash Maurya. He's a famous author. He wrote the book Running Lean and Scaling Lean. And they found the business model canvas, the one we just went through, a little too general for especially startups and smaller businesses. While the business model canvas might be good for understanding businesses from the outside in, it doesn't give so much actionable insights to the inside entrepreneur in the company. So the advantage of something like a lean canvas is that it reduces the uncertainty and risk to the initial stage of launching a business. And it's important to highlight that there is no tool that can, of course, remove all the risks in your business, right? And so with something like a lean canvas, we want to look at just a few of these things to get started as a small business. And the lean canvas is useful where all the building blocks are still missing. Yeah, so when you're missing maybe information about who your key partners could be, or what your key distribution could look like, you can start with something like this, right? So start with your customer segments. Who is the customer? How will you identify or qualify early adopters? These are the first few people that will generate money for you, for your business. How do they solve the problem today? So are there any existing alternatives? Any competitors that are doing the same thing? What are they doing? How can we do it differently? And what is the problem that you're trying to solve? Right, for your early adopters, for that customer segment, what are their most important 3 problems? And when you're using something like a leaner canvas, it's important not to fall into the innovator's bias, where you look at the customer segments, then the early adopters, the problem, and then the existing alternatives or the competition that is there in the market. You want to maybe go this route, which is called The Innovator's Gift by Ash Maurya, where he says, you want to start with the customer segment, then go into the early adopters. Who are they? What sort of alternatives are they using? Can they use? And then think more about how we can solve their problem. So with this approach, you're not falling so much in love with a specific solution or with a specific way of solving a problem. You're focused on how you can solve the problem in the best way possible. So now we have a quick exercise for the remaining of the webinar for you. So to apply what we've just talked about, especially with the leaner canvas, it would be great to open up the Miro board, and let me send the link in the chat if I can. Okay, so please open that Miro board in the chat and read that sample scenario. So we're going to walk you through a scenario, and we want to see how we can create a strategy together, how we can create a leaner canvas together. If you are not able to access the Miro board, please unmute yourself, please write it in the chat, and we can help you out.
Yeah.
All right. Are people able to access the Miro board?
It seems so.
Okay, great. So here on the left side, we have an example of a leaner canvas. So let's say you want to create a business and you see an opportunity for creating or building a new device that measures your home's energy consumption. All right, this is the opportunity you see. And so if we use something like the leaner canvas, these 4 different categories, customer segments, early adopters, alternatives, and problems, we want to think around those areas. So in our example of creating a new device that measures the energy consumption at home, that could look something like this. So for our customer segments, we have single individuals, we have people who make less than 40,000 euros per year, right? These are the people that we want to target because they're more likely to maybe get a device like the one that we want to offer. Some of the early adopters could be people who want to be more eco-friendly, people who are more cost conscious, and people that want a device that's more practical and transparent than maybe some of their existing measures. Okay, now that we've listed our early adopters, what other alternatives are there in the market? So maybe right now there is already an electric reader from the electric company that exists in the house. Maybe Siemens has a standalone device that's similar that you can buy and you can attach to your home. Those are the existing alternatives at the moment. And then the problem that we're trying to solve is maybe customers don't trust their energy supplier's bill. So they want to buy this device to double check. Or maybe it's complicated for them to understand the forecasts and the usage. Or maybe they simply want to learn more about their habits so that they can turn off the lights or turn off the stove when it's not in use, right? So that they can be a little more eco-friendly. So this was a quick example of using the leaner canvas for a potential business opportunity that you see. Are there any questions around this example?
People, are they mute or?
Yeah, feel free to unmute yourself on Zoom and ask as well. Okay. Then if there are no questions, do we want to jump into the scenario that we have prepared, Minaj?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, as you might remember, we had talked at the beginning of the presentation about good or bad strategy and what was right and wrong strategy. We had some kind of 5 small checklist. And here in this scenario, it's a real case indeed, a Swedish company called Boomerang in textile Swedish fashion, and which went on bankrupt in 2018. Here you can also read by yourself, but shortly the CEO makes a press release and they say that they had tried everything during the period, but unfortunately they couldn't manage to adapt their structures and process quickly to create a long-term profitability. Therefore, they have been forced to apply for bankruptcy. And Boomerang has been breached with declining results since 2012, by the way. And in 2016, the clothing label recorded as a loss of 31 million kronor and a turnover of 137 million. Despite the efforts, they reduced the staff and new managers, but it was not possible to reserve the ship anymore. So the CEO says that they had done everything since 2012, and but currently at that situation, they are fully committed to taking care of their employees who are shocked, of course, because of this bankrupt, and it feels terrible for him and for the leadership team. Now, in this scenario, we would like to think a little bit and advise for them on how they could change the company's strategy to be able to say what is left and manage to start it over again. So you see, there is a company who is going down, and is there a possibility to another strategy to make it better again with the existing small team? This is the question. We have taken good and bad strategy, Michael Porter checklist here, and we are indeed how many people. We can go to the breakout room and we can think about a strategy here. We created room 1, room 2, and you can write your answers according to the linear canvas example. What was it? First, what was the customer segment? Who were the early adapters? What were the existing alternatives at the moment in the business? And what are the main problems that the customers will dealing? According to this, is it possible that you write down your strategy and then we can evaluate together what we have overviewed today? That is the purpose. Is there any question? I am not so sure if everybody's hearing us. Okay.
All right. If there are no questions, maybe we do it in the 2 breakout rooms and we see. Yeah.
Okay. Are you sending?
Great. Yeah. So I will set up the 2 breakout rooms, and it will be for 10 minutes. So you have 10 minutes to fill in these 4 different parts of the linear canvas model.
Yeah.
All right. So you should all get a pop-up, and when you do, please accept it, and I will see you in 10 minutes. All right, so welcome back from the Linear Canvas exercise, and thank you for participating in it. This brings us to the end of this webinar. So thank you very much for joining. And we have a few more webinars coming up. We have the product strategy on September 27th, where we talk about creating and using effective product strategy in more detail with examples from different industry giants, as well as the one organizational culture.
Yes, and the next one, the third session of this three-part webinar series, the last one will be about organizational culture. And we will talk especially how we will use these intangible power, which is culture, to deliver our utmost strategy execution. So I hope today's webinar was something meaningful to you, and hope to see you the second session at September 27th.
Yeah, thank you for your attendance. It would be great if you could click on the link that we're sharing in the chat and provide us some feedback. It will help us improve the next time we do a webinar like this.
Yeah, it's very valuable for us. Thank you for participating. See you.